What if, hidden inside your body, there was a message, not written in words, not in code, a message older than history, older than language itself, and what if scientists just started to understand it? For decades, DNA has been called the blueprint of life, a biological instruction manual, a code that tells your body how to grow, how to heal, how to exist. But recently, a small group of scientists began asking a different question. What if DNA is more than instructions? What if it's communication? Not just chemical signals, not just biological processes, but something structured, intentional, something that looks like language. At first, the idea sounded absurd. Language belongs to humans, to speech, to symbols, not to molecules. But then something strange happened. Patterns began to appear, purpars that didn't behave like random biology, purpars that looked organized, repeating Glauert, almost meaningful. And once they saw it, they couldn't unsee it, so they dug deeper, and what they found changed everything. It started quietly in a genomics lab, far from headlines, far from public attention. A team of researchers were studying non-coding DNA, the part often called junk DNA. For years, scientists believed this section of DNA did almost nothing, no clear function, no obvious purpose, just leftover fragments from evolution. But that assumption was already starting to crack, because when researchers looked closer, this junk wasn't random. It was structured, highly structured. Certain sequences appeared again and again, across different individuals, across populations, even across continents, and more surprisingly, across time. Ancient DNA samples, taken from preserved human remains, showed the same repeating patterns, sequences that had survived for tens of thousands of years. That shouldn't happen by accident. Natural selection removes useless data, so why was this still here? Why was it preserved? One researcher, Dr. Elena Voss, decided to focus on these sequences. Not as biological noise, but as something else entirely. She began mapping them, cataloging every repetition, every variation, looking not for genes and for structure. And slowly, a pattern began to emerge. At first, it looked like simple repetition, but repetition alone isn't language. Then she noticed spacing. Certain sequences appeared at fixed intervals, like punctuation, pause, break, pause, break. That's when things became unsettling, because in human language, spacing matters, structure matters, stock matters, and here, inside DNA, was something that looked disturbingly similar. Dr. Voss shared her findings, most dismissed it. Coincidence, port-seeking bias. The human brain loves to find meaning where none exists, but one colleague didn't dismiss it. A computational linguist named Daniel Iqbal, his expertise wasn't biology, it was language systems, sparks in human communication. He looked at the sequences, and within minutes, he paused. Then said something no one expected. This isn't random. That moment changed the direction of the research. They began working together. Biology meets linguistics, DNA meets language theory. They fed the sequences into linguistic analysis models, the same models used to decode ancient scripts, lost languages, undeciphered symbols, and the results were impossible to ignore. The DNA sequences followed statistical patterns found in real languages, frequency distributions, symbol recurrence, hierarchical structure. These weren't random mutations. They behaved like words, like phrases, like rules. And then something even stranger happened. The sequences showed redundancy, just like human language, multiple ways to express similar information. That's not efficient for biology. But it's essential for communication. Why would DNA need redundancy? Unless it wasn't just storing information, it was trying to preserve meaning. The team expanded the study. They looked at DNA from different regions of the world, different populations, different eras, and what they found raised more questions than answers. The language-like sequences were not identical. They varied slightly, but the structure remained the same, like dialects, different versions of the same underlying system that shouldn't exist in DNA. Evolution doesn't create dialects. It creates variation, not structured variation, not systems that resemble communication. And yet, that's exactly what they were seeing. Then came the breakthrough moment. The one that changed everything. Daniel decided to treat the sequences as if they were encrypted. Not random, not purely biological, but encoded. He applied decryption algorithms, spotted alignment tools, symbol substitution models. At first, nothing. Then, a partial match, not to any known language, but to something else, something deeper, mathematical structure. The sequences aligned with recursive patterns, nested systems, like instructions within instructions, layers, inside layers. This wasn't just language, it was meta-language. A system capable of describing itself. But then something strange happened. One of the sequences stood out. It appeared in every human genome they tested, every single one, across all populations. Across all time periods, identical, perfectly preserved. That's almost impossible in evolutionary terms. Mutation should have altered it, drift should have changed it, but it remained unchanged. As if it was too important to lose, or too important to alter, they isolated the sequence, studied it in detail, and what they discovered shocked everyone. The sequence was not random. It wasn't just structured, it followed a pattern that matched a known system, a system used in human communication, a system used efficient code, meaning in the most efficient way possible. It resembled a compression algorithm, but not one humans created, something far older, far more refined, and when they ran the sequence through a decoding model, they didn't get a clear message. Not yet. But they got something else, something chilling, a repeating signal, a signal that suggested this wasn't just a record of the past, it was active, still functioning, still transmitting. From inside every human being, and that's when they realized they weren't just studying DNA anymore, they were listening to something hidden, something ancient. Something that might still be trying to speak. Scientists studying so-called junk DNA discovered something unexpected: portals, structure, sequence that behaved like language, not random, not accidental, but organized, intentional, and buried within every human genome. They found a sequence that had never changed, across time, across humanity. And when they tried to decode it, they didn't find a message, they found a signal, still active, still repeating, as if something was still speaking. This is where the story changes. The team realized they weren't dealing with biology alone, they were dealing with information. Encoded information. So they shifted their approach. Instead of asking, what does this DNA do biologically? They asked, what does it say? They expanded the dataset. Thousands of genomes, modern humans, ancient remains, even close relatives like Neanderthals, and something fascinating emerged. The core sequence was present in all modern humans, but in Neanderthals, it was different, not completely missing, but altered, simpler, less structured, almost like an earlier version. That raised a disturbing possibility. What if this language evolved, not biologically, informationally? What if it wasn't just inherited, refined? Daniel pushed further. He treated the sequence like compressed data, latte encoding, information hidden within information. Using advanced models, he began to peel back those layers. And slowly, patterns began to unfold, not words, not sentences, but relationships, sunch mappings. It was like looking at a blueprint, not of the body, and of something else, something abstract. Then came the moment no one expected. One of the decoded layers mapped onto neural activity, brain patterns, specifically patterns associated with language processing. That shouldn't happen. DNA builds the brain. It doesn't describe how the brain uses language, and yet this sequence seemed to anticipate it. As if a capacity for language, was written into the code, long before humans ever spoke. But then something strange happened. When they compared the DNA language to human languages, there were similarities, deep similarities, structural echoes, not direct translation, but shared architecture, like two systems, built on the same foundation. That raised a question no one was ready to answer. Did human language come from this, or did both come from something deeper? The team brought in more experts, cryptographers, neuroscientists, evolutionary biologists. Each one saw something different, but all agreed on one thing: this was not random. Then came the most controversial idea. What if the DNA sequence was not just a record? What if it was a communication system, not between cells, not between organisms, but across time? A message designed to survive for thousands of years. He in the one place evolution would protect, the human genome. They tested this idea, looking for signs of transmission, chunked over time, response patterns, and that's when they noticed something subtle. The sequence once wasn't completely static, tiny variations appeared. In recent generations, not random mutations, but structured changes. Like updates that shouldn't be possible. DNA doesn't update itself intentionally. And yet, this looked like it did. Then came the breakthrough, the one that changed everything. Daniel ran the sequence through a model designed to detect recursive encoding, systems that refer to themselves, systems that contain instructions on how to interpret them, and it worked, partially. A fragment of meaning emerged, not a full translation, but enough to understand the structure. It wasn't a sentence, it wasn't a story, it was something else, a framework, a set of rules, a guide for building language itself. Let that sink in, not a message, went the blueprint for communication. And that's when the most shocking theory emerged. What if this wasn't placed there by chance? What if it was designed, not necessarily by humans, not necessarily by anything we understand, but by a process or intelligence that existed long before recorded history? Now, to be clear, there is no evidence of alien origin, no proof of external intervention. But the structure, persistence, raises questions, serious questions. Because if this language is real, then it means something profound. It means communication is not just a human invention, it may be something deeper, something embedded into life itself. Think about that. Every human carries this sequence, this hidden pattern, this silent signal inside their cells, inside their DNA, something ancient, something preserved, something waiting. What does it mean? Are we just beginning to understand it? Or are we rediscovering something we were always meant to find? For Dr. Voss, discovery changed everything. She no longer saw DNA as just biology. She saw it as a library, a record, a system of knowledge, hid in plain sight. For Daniel, it was even more personal. As a linguist, he had spent his life studying how humans communicate, but this was different. This suggested that language was never truly invented, it was uncovered. And if that's true, then what else is hidden? What else is encoded inside us? We often think of ourselves as creators of language, as builders of meaning, but what if we are also its carriers? What if the words we speak, symbols we use, ideas we share, are echoes of something much older, something written, not in books, not in stone, not in the very code of who we are? And if scientists are only now beginning to decode it, then one question remains. What happens when we finally understand what it's been saying all along? Or more importantly, what if